Everyone got Porsches but me. Catherine smirked. Pay your $900 meal invoice. They expected tears. I smiled. That's okay. Here is your foreclosure notice. The room gasped when they saw it. My name is Blair. I am 33 years old, and according to my family, I am the ultimate cautionary tale. I am the black sheep, the dropout, the massive disappointment who could not hack it in the real world. For years, I have let them believe exactly that. The drive up the mountain to Aspen, Colorado, was a nightmare. The blizzard was howling, throwing thick, blinding sheets of white across the winding roads. I was gripping the steering wheel of my cheap, compact rental car so hard my knuckles were completely white, praying the worn-out tires would hold traction just a little longer. The heater in the car was broken, rattling noisily and blowing nothing but lukewarm air directly into my face. But the physical cold was absolutely nothing compared to the chill I knew was waiting for me at the top of this mountain. Finally, the grand iron gates of my family's winter estate loomed through the snowfall. It was a $10 million chalet, a sprawling masterpiece of dark timber, river stone, and floor-to-ceiling glass that looked like it belonged on the cover of a luxury architectural magazine. I parked my beat-up sedan at the very edge of the heated driveway, taking a deep breath before stepping out into the biting wind. I grabbed my battered canvas duffel bag and trudged toward the massive front doors. Before I even had my coat fully off, the performance began. I walked into the grand foyer, instantly hit by the overwhelming scent of roasted duck, cinnamon, and incredibly expensive perfume. The vaulted ceilings stretched up forever, echoing with the sounds of holiday music. Right in the middle of the living room, my older sister, Delaney, was orchestrating a photo shoot. She was holding a bright LED ring light in one hand and physically maneuvering her crying 2-year-old son, Felix, with the other. Felix, look at mommy's phone and smile. Stop crying, you're ruining the aesthetic. Delaney hissed, her voice dripping with that fake, high-pitched influencer sweetness she used whenever the camera was rolling. She was wearing a pristine white cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my first car. Delaney, leave the boy alone, he is tired, a cold voice cut through the room. It was my mother, Catherine. She descended the sweeping oak staircase, looking like absolute royalty. She wore a velvet emerald dress, a string of heavy pearls around her neck, and a glass of vintage champagne balanced perfectly in her manicured hand. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on me standing by the door in my faded, slightly pilling sweater I had bought from Target 5 years ago. Her expression instantly soured, as if someone had just tracked mud across her priceless Persian rugs. Which, actually, was exactly what she accused me of. Blair, Catherine sighed, pressing 2 fingers to her temple like the mere sight of me was giving her a migraine. You are finally here. I specifically asked the staff to leave the side door unlocked for you. Your boots are dripping slush all over the imported hardwood. Please tell me you brought something more presentable to wear for dinner then, whatever that is. I looked down at my sweater, then back up at my mother. I forced a small, apologetic smile. Good to see you too, Mom. The side door was frozen shut. And this is my warmest sweater. Catherine rolled her eyes, taking a slow sip of her champagne. Just put your bag in the guest room down the hall. Not the upstairs suite. Grant and Delaney need the extra space for Felix's toys. And try to make yourself useful before dinner. The catering staff is running behind. I nodded silently and picked up my bag. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just walked down the hall toward the smallest room in the house, playing the exact role they had written for me. The pathetic, helpless loser. Sitting on the edge of the stiff guest bed, I listened to the muffled sounds of laughter and clinking crystal echoing from the main hall. A lot of people might wonder why I would subject myself to this. Why would a 33-year-old woman fly across the country in a blizzard just to be treated like the hired help by her own mother and sister? The answer was simple, and it was sitting right there in my memory. My father. 8 years ago, my father was the CEO of Wilson Hospitality Group. He built that company from the ground up, starting with a single roadside motel and turning it into a respectable, profitable chain of boutique hotels. He was a brilliant, hardworking man, but he had one fatal flaw. He could never say no to Catherine. My mother was a social climber of the highest order. She wanted the Aspen Chalet, the country club memberships, the private jets, the galas. She wanted to stand shoulder to shoulder with billionaires. To fund her bottomless appetite for status, she nagged and pressured my father into taking out massive, high-interest corporate loans to expand the business faster than it could handle. I remember sitting at the kitchen table when I was in high school, watching him rub his tired eyes, trying to balance ledgers that were bleeding red, while Catherine complained about the color of the new yacht upholstery. He taught me how to read those balance sheets. He taught me about leverage, about risk, and about the terrifying weight of debt. When I was 25, halfway through medical school, the pressure finally broke him. My father died of a massive heart attack right at his desk. I found him there, his hand resting on a stack of past due notices. At his funeral, Catherine spent more time networking with wealthy widows than comforting her daughters. Within a month, my brother-in-law, Grant, a slick, arrogant corporate lawyer who had married Delaney for her assumed inheritance, stepped in as the new CEO. He promised to save the company. Instead, he started bleeding it dry to fund his own lavish lifestyle. That was the day I made my choice. I dropped out of medical school. It wasn't because I couldn't handle the coursework, like my family loved to tell their friends. It was because I realized that saving lives was a noble profession, but destroying corrupt corporations required an entirely different set of skills. I disappeared into the world of high finance. I started day trading distressed equities, leveraging a small inheritance from my grandmother, and I never looked back. I slept on a mattress on the floor, ate ramen noodles, and studied market trends until my eyes bled. Within 5 years, I had built Titanium Ventures, a private equity firm specializing in acquiring and restructuring toxic debt. I made my first million at 27. I made my first billion at 31. But I never told them. I kept my cheap apartment. I kept my faded clothes. I let them believe I was bouncing between minimum wage jobs, depressed and aimless. Because in the world of corporate warfare, invisibility is your greatest weapon. If you want to trap a wolf, you have to dress like a sheep. And tonight, the sheep was finally ready to bite back. By 8 o'clock, the massive mahogany dining table was cleared of the roasted duck and truffled potatoes, replaced by crystal dessert plates and an overwhelming pile of gifts. The fireplace was roaring, casting a warm, golden glow over the room. Catherine stood at the head of the table, tapping a silver spoon against her champagne flute to command the room's attention. She looked positively radiant, drunk on her own perceived importance. "I want to propose a toast," Catherine announced, her voice echoing in the large hall. She smiled warmly at Delaney and Grant, completely ignoring my existence at the far end of the table. "To my wonderful daughter, Delaney, and her brilliant husband, Grant. This has been a challenging year for the economy, but thanks to Grant's exceptional leadership at the company, our family legacy has never been stronger. Thank you, Grant, for keeping us at the top where we belong." Grant smirked, raising his glass in faux humility. He was wearing a custom-tailored Italian suit, his hair perfectly slicked back. "It is my honor, Catherine. We are building an empire." It took everything in my power not to burst out laughing. An empire built on maxed-out credit lines and fraudulent accounting, but I kept my mouth shut and took a sip of my tap water. "Now," Catherine clapped her hands together, "the gifts." She walked over to the towering Christmas tree, which was practically buried under designer bags and imported gift baskets. She reached down and pulled out a small, heavy box wrapped in shiny gold paper. She walked it over and set it directly in front of Grant. "For the man of the house," she beamed. Grant tore the paper off with the eagerness of a greedy child. He snapped the velvet box open, and Delaney gasped loudly. Inside, resting on a silk cushion, was a Patek Philippe watch. It was a massive, heavy piece of rose gold and intricate mechanics. I knew exactly how much that specific model cost. $50,000. It was worth more than my entire medical school tuition had been. "Catherine, this is incredible," Grant breathed, taking the watch out and immediately strapping it onto his wrist. He held his arm up to the light, admiring his own reflection. He shot a quick, superior glance down the table at me. It really pays to be successful in this family. And for my beautiful Delaney, Catherine continued, practically skipping back to the tree. She retrieved a tiny silver box and handed it to my sister. Delaney didn't even wait to say thank you. She ripped the lid off. She stared into the box for exactly 1 second before letting out an ear-piercing scream that made little Felix start crying again in the corner. She pulled out a keychain. Attached to it was a gleaming silver crest. "Oh my God. Mom, is this?" Delaney shrieked, jumping up and down. "It is the brand new Porsche Cayenne," Catherine said proudly, sipping her champagne. "Custom leather interior. It is parked in the heated garage waiting for you. A beautiful car for a beautiful mother." Delaney threw her arms around Catherine, sobbing fake tears of joy. The room was loud, obnoxious, and utterly consumed by materialism. They spent the next 10 minutes taking photos of the watch, the car keys, and themselves, making sure every angle was perfect for social media. I just sat there. My hands were folded quietly in my lap. I didn't have a gold box in front of me. I didn't have a silver box. In fact, the space on the table in front of me was completely bare. The air in the room slowly began to cool down as the initial excitement faded. They all returned to their seats. The silence stretched. Everyone knew exactly what was happening. Grant checked his new $50,000 watch, pretending to be bored. Delaney clutched her Porsche keys, looking down at me with a sickening mixture of pity and amusement. It was time for my gift. Catherine walked slowly back over to the tree. There were no more shiny gold boxes left. There were no ribbons, no velvet cases. She reached behind a pile of discarded wrapping paper and pulled out a thin, plain white business envelope. It looked exactly like a utility bill. The smile on her face was gone, replaced by a mask of stern, judgmental authority. She walked down the length of the long mahogany table. When she reached my end, she didn't hand it to me. She placed it on the polished wood and slid it across. It made a dry, scraping sound before coming to a stop right next to my empty water glass. "Go ahead, Blair. Open it," Delaney urged, letting out a sharp, cruel little giggle. "Maybe Mom got you a gift card to the thrift store." I looked up at Catherine. She was standing tall, looking down her nose at me. "Blair, your sister and brother-in-law work incredibly hard to maintain the lifestyle this family enjoys. You, on the other hand, have been unemployed and drifting aimlessly for 8 years since you quit your studies. We felt it was time you understood that the luxury you consume comes at a cost." I stared at the white envelope. I didn't feel shame. I didn't feel sadness. What I felt was a cold, absolute clarity spreading through my chest. I reached out and tore the paper open. There was no check inside. There was no greeting card. There was a single sheet of paper printed on Catherine's personal, watermarked stationery. At the top, in bold, aggressive letters, it read, "Vacation Cost-Sharing Breakdown." I scanned the itemized list. $400 for premium groceries consumed. $300 for heating and electricity usage. The total at the bottom was printed in thick black ink, $700. It was an invoice. They had handed me a bill for existing at their Christmas dinner. I looked up, my expression completely flat. "Is this a joke?" I asked, keeping my voice dangerously quiet. Catherine crossed her arms. "No, Blair. It is a lesson in accountability. Since you contribute absolutely nothing meaningful to society, we thought you should at least pay your fair share for this vacation." Before I could even respond, Grant cleared his throat loudly. He reached over and opened his sleek silver laptop, pulling up a spreadsheet. He adjusted his suit jacket, looking every bit the ruthless corporate shark he pretended to be. "Actually, Catherine, I think your math is a little generous," Grant said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "I just ran a quick calculation based on the current consumer price index in Aspen and the square footage of the guest wing. Blair is occupying 15% of the total floor plan. Plus, she consumes approximately 3,000 calories of premium food daily." He turned the laptop screen toward me, displaying a colorful pie chart he had clearly prepared hours ago. "Strictly speaking, Blair, you actually owe us closer to $900 for your weekend stay." But since it is Christmas and we are family, we are giving you a discount. Consider the $200 difference our holiday gift to you." The room went completely silent. They leaned forward slightly in their chairs. They were waiting for the breakdown. They were waiting for the poor, helpless, broke sister to start crying, to beg for forgiveness, to admit she didn't have $900 to her name. That was the script they had written for this evening's entertainment. But I wasn't going to read their script. Suddenly, a bright white light flashed in my eyes. I blinked, looking over to see Delaney standing up, leaning across the table. She had her phone out, the camera pointed directly at my face, and the red live button blinking in the corner of the screen. "Oh my God, you guys, look at her face right now," Delaney chirped into the microphone, using her fake internet persona. "We are teaching my big sister a little lesson about the real world tonight. She literally thought she could just come to Aspen and ride our coattails for free. Can we get a fit check on that sweater? It is literally falling apart. Honestly, she should be grateful we even let her sit at the dinner table. Right, babe?" She panned the camera over to Grant, who flashed a $1 million smile, making sure to hold up his wrist so his new $50,000 watch caught the light perfectly. "Teaching fiscal responsibility is an act of love, Delaney," Grant said, smooth as silk. "We are just trying to help her grow up." Delaney giggled, zooming the camera back onto the piece of paper in my hand. I knew exactly who was watching that stream. It was her circle of rich, bored country club wives, women who judged a person's entire worth by the logo on their handbag. She was broadcasting my humiliation to the world for entertainment. I sat perfectly still. I didn't throw my water glass at her phone. I didn't scream. I just let them talk, let them dig the hole just a little bit deeper. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out my own phone. It wasn't the encrypted device I used to manage the billion-dollar assets of Titanium Ventures. It was an older model, the one loaded with a basic checking account that showed a balance of exactly $2,000. The account they thought held my entire life savings. "Fine," I said, my voice cutting through Delaney's chatter. $700. "What is the email address for the transfer, Catherine?" Catherine blinked, clearly thrown off by my total lack of tears. "You can send it to my personal account," she said stiffly. "But do not think this buys you any special treatment. You are still expected to help the catering staff clean the kitchen tonight." I looked down at my screen. I typed in the amount. $700. I pressed confirm. The cell signal in Aspen was excellent. Less than 3 seconds later, a loud, cheerful ding echoed from Catherine's designer purse sitting on the floor. It was the distinct notification sound of a banking app receiving cash. Catherine frowned, reaching down into her bag. She pulled out her phone and stared at the screen. Her eyebrows shot up to her hairline. "She paid it," Catherine muttered, her voice entirely flat with shock. "The full amount." Instantly. Delaney immediately lowered her phone, the live stream still running, but now just recording the mahogany table. "Wait, what? She actually had $700. Delaney sounded genuinely disappointed. She wanted a meltdown. She wanted dramatic content for her followers. I locked my phone and slid it back into my pocket. "Transaction complete," I said, my voice completely detached. "I believe my debts for this evening are settled. Now, since we are doing the gift exchange, I believe it is my turn." I reached down to my canvas duffel bag resting by my feet. I unzipped the side pocket and pulled out a small, square box. It was wrapped in matte black paper. There was no shiny ribbon, no bow, and absolutely no name tag. It looked dark, solid, and entirely out of place among the gold and silver paper scattered around the room. I stood up and placed the black box gently in the exact center of the table, right next to a crystal candle holder. "Because unlike you," I said softly, looking directly at Grant, "I did not come empty-handed." Grant leaned forward, squinting at the black box with a mixture of suspicion and profound disdain. "Is that it?" he asked, poking the edge of the box with his index finger. "It looks ominous." "What is it, Blair? Did you make us some homemade soap? Or maybe a collage of your feelings?" He picked the box up and shook it violently next to his ear. It made no sound at all. It was heavy but packed tight. Whatever it is, it definitely does not belong in the same tax bracket as my new watch, Grant sneered. He made a tossing motion, pretending he was going to throw it over his shoulder into the fireplace. Put it down, Grant, Catherine commanded sharply. She walked over and took the box from him, holding it by the very corners as if she were worried it might infect her with poverty. We are not savages. We will accept the gift, regardless of its monetary value. I will put it under the tree, and we can open it tomorrow morning when the staff clears the rubbish. Actually, I interrupted, my voice sharp enough to make her stop in her tracks. Not tomorrow morning. That box is to be opened at exactly midnight on New Year's Eve. Not a minute before. Delaney groaned loudly, throwing her head back against her chair. Oh my God, Blair, why do you have to make everything so weird and dramatic? Is it a time capsule? That is so cringe. Seriously, just let us open it now so we can pretend to like it and throw it away. Midnight on New Year's Eve, I repeated, ignoring her entirely. Those are the rules. If you open it before then, the gift becomes completely void. Catherine sighed, clearly exhausted by having to breathe the same air as me. Fine, Blair. Whatever makes you feel important. We will hide your little mystery box until New Year's. She walked over and shoved the black box deep into the shadows behind the tree, completely out of sight. She turned back to the room, clapping her hands together briskly. Now, everyone, go grab your coats. The limousine will be here in 5 minutes to take us to the Alpine Sanctuary Spa. I booked the Midnight Diamond Dust Rejuvenation Package. We all desperately need to relax. I stood up, adjusting my sweater. I'll go get my boots. Grant let out a sharp bark of laughter. He stepped in front of me, blocking my path to the hallway. Where exactly do you think you are going, Blair? To the spa, I said calmly. Mom said she booked a package. Catherine didn't even turn around to look at me as she draped a heavy mink coat over her shoulders. I booked the Platinum Family Estate package, darling. It strictly covers 4 people. Me, Delaney, Grant, and little Felix. The resort is incredibly strict about capacity limits. You're taking a 2-year-old toddler to a midnight spa session instead of your own daughter? I asked, letting a little bit of fake hurt seep into my voice. The mineral waters are very good for Felix's sensitive skin, Delaney chimed in, glaring at me. Besides, the VIP membership requires everyone to have the same last name or be legal dependents. You're neither. You're just a guest who barely paid her tab. So, what am I supposed to do? I asked, gesturing to the empty room. Catherine waved a hand vaguely at the dining table, which was covered in dirty plates, half-empty wine glasses, and greasy napkins. Well, since you paid for the food, you can clean up the mess. The catering staff already left due to the blizzard. I hate waking up to a dirty house. Scrub the pots, load the dishwasher, and wipe down the marble counters. Consider it your rent for the night. Grant clapped me hard on the shoulder, his grip painfully tight. Do not look so sad, Blair. Hard manual labor builds character. Maybe if you scrub those pans hard enough, you can wash away some of that failure. They swept out of the room in a cloud of fur and arrogance, laughing loudly. The heavy oak front door slammed shut. A moment later, I heard the crunch of tires on the icy driveway as their private limousine pulled away into the storm. I was completely alone. I stood in the silence for a long moment. Then a slow, cold smile spread across my face. I walked over to the kitchen sink and turned on the tap. I picked up Catherine's dirty champagne flute and grabbed a sponge. Let them have their diamond dust facials. Let them enjoy the hot stones and the mineral water. Because they had absolutely no idea that they were currently sleeping right next to a ticking time bomb. Inside that black box wasn't homemade soap or cheap crafts. It was the legal paperwork that would strip them of everything they owned. Enjoy the spa, I thought as I scrubbed the glass. It will be the last luxury you ever experience. If you enjoyed seeing how Blair remained calm in the face of her family's arrogance, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with the name of the city you live in. Every comment helps the video reach a wider audience. Thank you so much. The chalet was dead silent, save for the relentless howling of the wind against the heavy timber beams outside. It was almost 2 in the morning. The family had returned from their spa treatment hours ago, glowing with expensive oils and false contentment, and immediately gone up to their luxurious suites to sleep. I was still awake. I was sitting in the darkened kitchen on a hard wooden stool, nursing a glass of cold water. I had spent the last 3 hours scrubbing every single plate, polishing the silverware, and wiping down the granite countertops until my hands were raw and aching. Just as I stood up to finally head back to the tiny guest room, I felt a sharp, short vibration in my pocket. I pulled out my secure phone. The screen glowed harshly in the semi-darkness, displaying a single, encrypted text message from Gregory, my lead attorney and right-hand man at Titanium Ventures. The message read, Phase 1 activated. Credit lines frozen globally. The bank just notified the target. They have no idea what is coming. I stared at the screen, letting out a long, slow breath. The trap had officially sprung shut. Suddenly, a noise broke the silence of the house. It was a hushed, angry whisper coming from the downstairs powder room at the end of the hallway. I froze, my bare feet silent on the thick Persian rug. I crept closer, pressing my back against the cold stone wall of the corridor. The heavy bathroom door was cracked open just a sliver, letting a single beam of yellow light cut across the dark hardwood floor. I could see a shadow pacing frantically back and forth. It was Grant. "Listen to me, you incompetent bureaucrat," Grant hissed into his cell phone, his voice vibrating with barely suppressed panic. "I do not care what the compliance department says. We have a temporary liquidity issue, not a solvency issue. There is a massive difference." I held my breath. Grant was usually so composed, so endlessly arrogant with his legal jargon and his tailored suits. But right now, standing in a marble bathroom at 2 in the morning, he sounded exactly like a cornered animal. There was a pause as the person on the other end of the line spoke. Grant ran a hand roughly through his perfectly styled hair, ruining it. "No, you cannot freeze the operating accounts." Grant snapped, his voice rising in terror before he forcefully lowered it again. "If you freeze those accounts, payroll bounces on Friday. Do you know what happens if the hotel staff do not get paid? The unions will eat us alive. We will be front-page news." I took a sip of my water, letting the cool liquid calm the adrenaline spiking in my chest. Phase 1 was working even faster than I had anticipated. The banks were executing the credit freeze I had secretly ordered from Titanium Ventures. "Look, just give me 48 hours, Grant pleaded, sheer desperation seeping into his tone. "I am in Aspen right now. I am working on a solution. I have personal assets I can liquidate. Just do not send the default notice to the main office. My mother-in-law, Catherine, is the registered agent. If she sees that letter, she will ruin me." He stopped talking, listening to the banker's response. Then he slammed his fist hard against the marble vanity, making the expensive soap dispenser rattle. $5 million is nothing, he lied through his teeth, his voice shaking. "The company is valued at $50 million. We are good for it. I just need time to move some capital around. Please." The call ended abruptly. The number hung heavy in the stale air. $5 million. I knew from my corporate espionage that the Wilson Hospitality Group was struggling, but hearing the sheer panic in his voice confirmed just how incredibly deep the rot went. And the worst part wasn't even the debt itself. It was the absolute deception. Upstairs, Catherine and Delaney were sleeping soundly under silk sheets, dreaming of their perfect, untouchable lives, believing they were royalty. Meanwhile, their golden boy was down here fighting off the financial executioner, lying to everyone to protect his fragile ego. He knew that if Catherine found out he had run her late husband's empire into the ground, she would cut him off completely. I watched through the crack in the door as Grant splashed cold water on his face, looking exhausted and utterly terrified. Before he could turn off the light, I slipped silently away into the shadows and crept back to my room. Grant thought he had 48 hours to fix this mess. He was so incredibly wrong. He didn't even have until sunrise. The sun had barely begun to rise over the snow-capped peaks of the Rockies when I walked into the kitchen the next morning. Despite the early hour, I wasn't the first one awake. Grant was standing by the espresso machine, fully dressed in a casual but expensive cashmere sweater. The frantic, Sweating mess of a man I had witnessed in the bathroom just a few hours ago was completely gone. In his place was the polished, confident lawyer, wearing a veneer of brotherly concern that immediately made my skin crawl. "Good morning, Blair," Grant said, his voice smooth and welcoming. He held out a ceramic mug. "I made you a latte. Oat milk, just the way you like it. I know you had a late night cleaning up for us." I stopped in my tracks, eyeing him with extreme suspicion. Grant had never, in the 8 years he had known me, offered to make me a cup of coffee. He didn't do favors unless there was a heavy string attached. "Thank you," I said cautiously, taking the mug but not drinking from it. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Grant leaned casually against the granite island, crossing his ankles to project an aura of total relaxation. "I have been thinking a lot about you, Blair. About what Catherine said at dinner last night. It was harsh. But you know she only says those things because she wants what is best for you. And honestly, I want to help you too." I stayed completely silent, waiting for the trap to spring. Grant reached behind him and pulled a sleek leather folder off the counter. He opened it and slid a thick stack of legal documents toward me. "I know your father left you that small trust fund when he passed," Grant continued, his voice dropping to a confidential, caring whisper. $200,000, right? Tied up in that old timber cabin on the lake. Right now, that asset is just sitting there doing absolutely nothing. Property taxes and inflation are eating it alive. As your brother-in-law, and as a financial expert, it physically pains me to see you losing money." He tapped the top of the document with a gold pen. "I want to help you manage it." I set my coffee mug down on the counter slowly. "You want to manage my trust fund?" I asked, widening my eyes to look as naive and innocent as humanly possible. "But Grant, you and Mom just spent all of dinner telling me how bad I am with money. Wouldn't it be safer just leaving it in the bank?" Grant let out a short, condescending laugh, exactly like a teacher correcting a slow student. "Blair, that is exactly why you need me. The markets are incredibly volatile right now. You need sophisticated management. If you give me control, I can roll the equity of that cabin into one of my high-performing corporate funds. I guarantee I can double your money in a year. You would never have to worry about getting a dinner invoice from Catherine ever again." He pushed the gold pen into my hand. "Just sign this power of attorney, and I will handle all the complicated paperwork." I looked down at the document. I didn't need to read the fine print to know what it was. It was a standard, predatory transfer of assets. It granted him full, unrestricted legal control to liquidate my property. He wanted to sell the only thing my father had ever explicitly given me, just to plug the massive $5 million hole in his sinking company. "So, this is like a mutual fund?" I asked, putting on my most confused, childlike expression. "Like the ones they advertise on television?" Grant sighed heavily, his carefully crafted patience already beginning to fray at the edges. "No, Blair, it is much more complex than a television commercial. It is an exclusive financial vehicle for accredited investors only. You would not understand the technicalities if I spent all day explaining them. Just trust me. I am doing you a huge favor." "But what about the risk?" I pressed, leaning forward over the papers. "If the market crashes, do I lose the cabin? Is this money insured by the federal government like a regular bank account?" Grant slammed his hand down flat on the granite counter. The sound cracked like a whip in the quiet kitchen. The friendly brother-in-law mask slipped entirely, revealing the desperate, vicious man underneath. "Jesus Christ, Blair, stop asking stupid questions," he snapped, a vein throbbing visibly in his temple. "Do you want to be poor forever? Do you want to be the pathetic, dependent sister who cannot even pay for her own groceries? I am offering you a lifeline. Sign the damn paper." I looked at his flushed face. He needed my $200,000 so badly, he was willing to scream at me for it. It was pocket change to Titanium Ventures, but to him, it was a vital gasp of air. I pushed the heavy legal document slowly back across the counter toward him. "I think I will stick with the bank, Grant," I said, my voice perfectly calm and even. "I like knowing exactly where my property is." Grant stared at me, his eyes turning cold and incredibly venomous. "You are making a mistake," he hissed, grabbing the folder and clutching it to his chest. "A huge, unforgivable mistake. When you finally hit rock bottom and come crawling to me for a loan, do not expect an ounce of mercy. He turned on his heel and stormed out of the kitchen, leaving his own coffee untouched. I watched him go, a genuine smile finally touching my lips. He was completely right about one thing. Someone in this house was making a huge mistake. But it certainly wasn't me. Less than an hour later, the door to my tiny guest room didn't just open, it practically exploded inward, hitting the wall with a loud bang. I was sitting calmly on the edge of the bed, staring out the frosted window at the falling snow, when Catherine marched into the room like a general leading a cavalry charge. She didn't look like the elegant, pearls-wearing matriarch from dinner. Her hair was slightly disheveled, and her face was red with a terrifying mixture of panic and absolute fury. Delaney and Grant flanked her, crowding the small doorway. "Grant just told me everything," Catherine announced, her voice shaking with rage. She slammed the door shut behind her. "He told me you are stubbornly refusing to let him manage your assets. He told me you are actively choosing to let this family sink during a temporary cash flow issue." I stood up, holding my ground. "Mom, it is not that simple. He wants me to sign over total control of Dad's cabin. Do not you dare speak to me about simplicity, Blair." Catherine screamed, waving her hands wildly. "Your sister is out in the hallway crying because she is terrified of losing her lifestyle. Grant is desperately trying to save a legacy that has been in this family for 2 generations. And you are sitting up here in my house, hoarding a measly $200,000 property out of sheer spite? You are selfish. You have always been selfish." Catherine began to pace violently around the small room. She grabbed my toiletries bag from the dresser and threw it onto the floor. "Your father would be so deeply ashamed of you," she spat, weaponizing his memory like a jagged knife. "He worked himself into an early grave to build this life for us. If he could see you now, hoarding his money while his beloved company faces a hurdle, he would be heartbroken. You are the biggest disappointment of his entire life." That accusation was a low, dirty blow. My father was the only person in this family who ever believed in my intellect. But Catherine was actively rewriting history to manipulate my emotions. I bit the inside of my cheek hard to stop myself from snapping back with the truth. "Mom, please stop," I whispered, forcing my voice to tremble. "You do not know what you are doing." "I know exactly what I am doing," Catherine shrieked. "Where are the papers? Grant said he left them for you. Where are they?" She didn't wait for an answer. She lunged at my canvas duffel bag sitting on the luggage rack. She unzipped it violently and started ripping my belongings out. My cheap sweaters, my socks, my books flew across the room in a chaotic mess. Delaney stepped into the room, spotting a thick, leather-bound sketchbook that had fallen onto the carpet. She picked it up with a cruel sneer. It was the book I used to hand-draw the acquisition strategies and corporate structures for titanium ventures. "Look at this, Mom," Delaney laughed, flipping through the pages of complex flowcharts and building schematics. She is 33 years old, and she is still drawing pictures of buildings like a little kindergartner. "You think you are going to be an architect, Blair? You could not even finish basic medical school." Delaney grabbed a handful of the pages and violently ripped them out of the binding. The sound of tearing paper filled the room. She threw the crumpled, ruined pages right at my face like garbage. "Stop it," I pleaded, acting the part of the helpless victim perfectly. Grant stepped forward, blocking my view of Delaney. He had dropped the friendly brother act entirely. He looked down at me with the cold, dead eyes of a predator. "You think you have a choice here, Blair?" Grant said, his voice low and dangerous. "I am telling you right now, if you do not sign that power of attorney voluntarily in the next 5 minutes, I will file a petition with the state probate court first thing tomorrow morning. Do you know what a conservatorship is?" I stared at him, my heart pounding, this time from genuine shock at his audacity. He was actually threatening to legally lock me away. "I can paint a very, very convincing picture for a judge, Blair," Grant sneered, stepping closer until I could smell the mint on his breath. "A 33-year-old woman who dropped out of school due to a severe mental breakdown. A woman who has been unemployed for 8 years, showing extreme signs of irrational behavior and financial incompetence. I have powerful friends on the bench, Blair. I can have you declared mentally incapacitated, and I will be named your legal guardian. I will take that cabin, and you will have absolutely no rights left. He shoved the legal folder and his heavy gold Mont Blanc pen into my chest. Sign the papers, Blair, Catherine ordered, pointing a trembling finger at the door. Sign them right now, or so help me God, you are no longer my daughter. I will throw you out the front door into that blizzard with nothing but the clothes on your back. I looked at the three of them. There was no love in this room. There was only raw, unfiltered greed. They were willing to strip me of my human rights, label me insane, and throw me into a freezing storm just to keep up their country club appearances for one more month. I took the folder. My hands were shaking, but my mind was crystal clear. If I refused, they would physically kick me out before I could execute the final, glorious phase of my plan. I needed to buy just a few more hours of time. I needed them to think they had won. I uncapped the gold pen. I hovered the nib over the signature line. I looked right at the camera lens of Delaney's phone sticking out of her pocket, knowing it wasn't recording, but wishing it was. I wanted witnesses to this coercion. I pressed the pen to the paper. But instead of my careful, practiced, legally binding signature, I scribbled a jagged, chaotic, illegible mess. It looked like the frantic scratching of a child. I did the same on the initial lines on every single page. A completely fake signature. There, I whispered, letting the pen drop to the floor. Take it. Grant snatched the papers out of my hand before the ink was even dry. He was so blinded by his own desperation and greed that he didn't even check the signature. He just saw ink on the line and assumed he had won. Perfect, Grant breathed, a predatory grin stretching across his face. He clutched the folder to his chest like a shield. You made the right choice, Blair. You just saved your own future. He turned and practically sprinted out of the room, eager to fax the documents to his broker and illegally wire my supposed inheritance into his failing accounts. He had no idea what he had just done. By forcing me to sign under extreme duress, and by accepting a signature that didn't match any of my bank records, Grant had just committed felony bank fraud. And since the institution he was desperately trying to pay off was secretly owned by me, he had just personally handed me the final nail for his own coffin. The next morning, the breakfast table at the Aspen Chalet was laden with a spread that screamed excess. There were silver platters of eggs Benedict, smoked salmon flown in from Scotland, and baskets of pastries that smelled of high-grade butter. But the atmosphere was far from festive. Grant was hunched over his third cup of espresso, his eyes bloodshot as he scrolled frantically through his phone. He had spent the last hour trying to verify the transfer of my trust fund assets, but the bank's interface kept giving him a generic, pending review message. He didn't know that my team at Titanium Ventures had already flagged the transaction as fraudulent the moment it hit the server. Suddenly, a sharp, aggressive chime echoed through the dining room. It wasn't a text message, it was a high-priority legal alert. Grant's phone nearly slipped from his hand as he tapped the notification. His face didn't just turn pale, it turned a sickly, translucent gray. The silver fork in his other hand clattered loudly against his porcelain plate. Grant? What is it? Delaney asked, pausing mid-bite of her croissant. Is it the bank? Did the wire go through? Grant didn't answer. He stared at the screen as if he were reading his own obituary. His breathing became shallow and jagged. No, he whispered, his voice trembling so hard it was barely audible. It is not the bank. The bank sold our entire loan portfolio. Every single cent of our debt. Catherine looked up sharply from her orange juice, her eyes narrowing. Sold it? What are you talking about, Grant? Banks do not just sell active loans in the middle of a holiday. Who did they sell it to? Grant swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing convulsively. A firm called Titanium Ventures. They just acquired our entire debt package this morning, and they are not interested in a grace period. They have triggered a call-in clause. He began scrolling down the document, his thumb moving with a frantic, desperate energy. They're demanding full repayment of the principal and all accrued interest. $5 million. Immediately. By the close of business today. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees in an instant. $5 million? Today? Catherine repeated, the words sounding foreign and impossible on her tongue. That is insane. The bank gave us until the end of the quarter. They cannot just change the terms because they sold a piece of paper. Grant looked up, his eyes wide with a primal sort of panic I had never seen in him before. They can, Catherine. It is buried in the fine print of the emergency bridge loan I signed last month. If the debt is sold to a distressed asset firm, they have the legal right to demand full payment if they deem the borrower insolvent. And since our credit lines are frozen, we are technically insolvent. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my tea, hiding the smile that was threatening to break through my mask of indifference. Titanium Ventures. The name sounded so imposing, so cold. They had no idea that the ruthless firm was currently sitting at the end of their table, wearing a Target sweater and eating cold toast. They had no idea that the ghost who now owned their lives was the same daughter they had tried to rob just hours ago. The next hour was a masterclass in human desperation. Grant had turned the dining room into a crisis command center. He had 3 different phones laid out on the mahogany table, cycling through contacts in his digital Rolodex, begging for a lifeline. I watched from my wingback chair by the window as sweat began to bead on his forehead, eventually staining the collar of his expensive dress shirt. He looked less like a corporate shark and more like a man drowning in 3 inches of water. Arthur, you have to help me. Grant pleaded into one phone, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the receiver. It is a hostile takeover. Titanium Ventures is moving in for the kill. I just need a bridge loan for 48 hours. The voice on the other end was faint but clear enough for me to hear. Grant, are you crazy? Titanium Ventures isn't just a firm, they are a ghost. Nobody knows who actually runs it. If they bought your debt, it is because they already own you. Do not drag my firm into this. We are cutting ties. The line went dead. Grant slammed the phone onto the table with a primal scream of frustration. While Grant was spiraling, Delaney decided to take matters into her own hands. She pulled a portable ring light out of her handbag and set it up on the marble mantel. She adjusted the brightness until it illuminated her tear-stained face perfectly. What are you doing, Delaney? Catherine snapped, her nerves frayed to the breaking point. I am saving us, Mom. Delaney cried, tapping the record button on her phone. Her face instantly transformed from genuine misery to a practiced, professional performance of vulnerability. Hey guys, she whispered into the camera, her voice trembling just the right amount. I do not usually do this, but my family is going through a really hard time right now. We are being targeted by some very bad people who want to take away our father's legacy. I just started a GoFundMe page called Help the Wilson Family Save Their Home. Please swipe up to donate. Even $5 helps keep our dream alive. Grant spun around so fast he nearly tripped over his chair. He crossed the room in 2 long strides and snatched the phone out of Delaney's hand. The ring light toppled over, crashing onto the stone hearth with a loud shatter. Are you insane? Grant roared, his face twisting with rage. You are begging strangers for $5 on the internet? You are telling the whole world we are insolvent. If Titanium Ventures sees this, they will know we have 0 options left. You are not saving our reputation, you are lighting it on fire. I was just trying to help. Delaney shrieked back, her face flushing a deep, angry red. I have loyal followers. They love me. They do not love you, Delaney. They watch you because you are rich. If they find out you are broke, they will laugh at you. I sat in the corner, sipping my tea, watching the empire crumble one Instagram post at a time. The golden couple was cracking, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Catherine, who had been staring out the window at the blizzard, suddenly turned her gaze toward me. Her eyes were darting around the room, looking for someone, anyone, to blame for the catastrophe. It is you, Catherine whispered. Her voice was low, but it carried across the room with terrifying clarity. I lowered my book slowly. Excuse me, Mom? It is you, she repeated, her voice rising to a shriek as she marched toward me. You are the jinx, Blair. Ever since you arrived in Aspen, everything has gone wrong. You brought this negative energy into our home. You sit there with that smug, quiet look on your face while your sister's future is being destroyed. Do you even have a shred of empathy, or are you enjoying this? It was fascinating to watch the mental gymnastics required to blame a global financial acquisition on a daughter's bad vibes. Mom, I fail to see how my presence caused a multi-billion-dollar investment firm to acquire a distressed debt portfolio, I said calmly. That seems like a matter of poor management and bad accounting, not negative energy. Catherine let out a scream of pure rage. She snatched the book from my hands and threw it across the room, where it hit the wall with a dull thud. Stop talking about things you do not understand. You are poison, Blair. You are the reason your father died early because you stressed him out with your failures. I didn't flinch. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a single tear. I simply stood up and brushed a speck of dust from my pants. Suddenly, the shrill ring of the landline cut through the screaming. We all jumped. Nobody ever used the landline. It was a relic kept only for emergencies. Grant scrambled to the hallway and snatched up the receiver. Hello? This is Grant Wilson. His expression shifted instantly. The terror smoothed out, replaced by a look of profound relief. Yes, I understand. We are currently in residence. We can be there by 4 o'clock. Absolutely. We look forward to meeting the chairman. He hung up and turned to us, a predatory grin spreading across his face. That was the executive assistant to the chairman of Titanium Ventures. They want a face-to-face meeting today at 4 o'clock in the presidential suite at the Ritz-Carlton. I knew it, Catherine exclaimed, clapping her hands. They realize the value of the Wilson name. They want to negotiate, Grant. They probably want to keep us on as consultants. Exactly, Grant agreed, his arrogance returning like a light switch. Private equity firms always want the human capital. They need us to run the hotels. They're inviting us to the Ritz-Carlton to sign a partnership deal, not an eviction notice. I watched them scatter, running upstairs to find their most expensive Armani suits and pearl necklaces. They were drowning men, convinced that the shark circling them was a dolphin coming to save them. Blair, Grant shouted from the stairs. Get ready. Put on that plain black dress I told you to wear. You are coming with us. We need to look like a united family business. But remember your role. You are the help. Do not open your mouth unless you are pouring water. I looked at the shredded remains of my sketchbook on the floor. I'll be ready, Grant. The blizzard had turned the world into a chaotic white void. As we stepped out of the chalet, the wind howled like a wounded animal, stinging my skin even through my heavy coat. A black Cadillac Escalade was waiting in the driveway, its engine idling and sending thick plumes of exhaust into the freezing air. Grant was in a state of high agitation, barking orders at the driver. Hold this, Blair, Grant commanded, shoving his heavy leather briefcase into my chest so hard it knocked the breath out of me. And do not put it on the floor. The heater vents might damage the bindings of the reports. Just hold it on your lap and do not let the documents wrinkle. That briefcase holds the future of this family. I gripped the handle, feeling the literal weight of his fraudulent spreadsheets in my hands. I climbed into the front passenger seat, while Grant, Catherine, and Delaney piled into the back. The hierarchy was clear. They were the executives, and I was the luggage. Inside the vehicle, the air was thick with the scent of expensive leather and metallic fear. Grant was rehearsing his pitch under his breath, muttering buzzwords like synergy and operational excellence. He sounded like a broken record, trying to convince himself of his own lie. Catherine was checking her reflection in a compact mirror, smoothing her hair. I want to look authoritative, she said to no one. I want the chairman to know he is dealing with a matriarch. I sat silently in the front, staring at the passing pine trees that looked like ghosts in the snow. Underneath the bulk of the briefcase, I slid my secure phone out of my pocket. I kept it low, hidden from the rearview mirror. I typed a single sentence to my team. The fish has taken the bait. Entering the Ritz-Carlton now. A second later, the reply came back. The net is closing, Madam Chairman. We are ready for you. I slid the phone back into my pocket and stared at the winding road. We were driving toward luxury and warmth, but for my family, we were driving straight into a slaughterhouse. The transition from the biting cold of the blizzard to the hushed, golden warmth of the Ritz-Carlton lobby was jarring. The lobby was a cathedral of wealth, with vaulted ceilings and crystal chandeliers the size of small cars. Grant immediately straightened his spine, adjusting his suit jacket to hide the sweat stains. He scanned the room for threats, and his eyes landed on a man standing near the concierge. "Oh God," Grant whispered, his voice cracking. "That is Julian, a senior partner from the firm's committee. He cannot see me here. He thinks I am on a ski trip. If he knows I am here for a distressed debt meeting, I am finished." But it was too late. Julian turned and spotted us. "Grant Wilson," he boomed, walking over with his hand extended. "I thought that was you. What are you doing in Aspen? I thought you were strictly a Swiss Alps man." Grant put on his best courtroom smile, shaking Julian's hand vigorously. "Change of scenery, Julian. Just a quick family getaway." Julian laughed, glancing at Delaney and Catherine. "Lovely to see you, ladies. You look radiant." Then his gaze shifted to me. I was standing 3 paces behind the group, struggling under the weight of Grant's heavy briefcase and holding Delaney's fur coat, which she had thrust at me the moment we entered. I was wearing the plain, conservative black dress Grant had forced me into, my hair pulled back in a severe, invisible bun. Julian squinted at me, trying to place my face. "And who is this? Is this your sister-in-law? I believe we met at the Christmas gala a few years ago." This was it. This was Grant's chance to show even a shred of human decency. To acknowledge me as his family. Grant's eyes flickered with a cold, calculated shame. He didn't want a senior partner to know his sister-in-law was a failure who carried his bags like a pack mule. "No," Grant said quickly, his laugh nervous and high-pitched. "You are mistaken, Julian. This is Audrey. She is just our help. She travels with us to assist with the luggage and the heavy lifting. You know how hard it is to find good staff these days." Julian's expression cleared instantly, and he nodded dismissively, losing all interest in me. "Ah, I see. Well, good help is hard to find indeed." He turned his back on me, focusing his attention back on Grant's success. I stood there frozen. The briefcase felt like lead in my hands. The help. He had reduced my entire existence, my education, and my blood relation to him down to a servant role to protect his fragile ego. I didn't cry. I simply tightened my grip on the handle of the briefcase. He had just disowned me in public. He had just severed the very last thread of mercy I might have had for him. The heavy brass doors of the elevator slid shut, sealing us inside a box of golden velvet. The sudden silence was deafening. Delaney was hyperventilating, her hands shaking as she clutched her handbag. "Grant, what if they do not want a partnership? We do not have $5 million. I cannot be poor. I do not know how to be poor." "Shut up, Delaney," Grant hissed. "We have a plan. We have the leverage of the Wilson brand." The elevator dinged, and we stepped out into the lavish hallway of the penthouse floor. We stood before the massive mahogany double doors of the presidential suite. Just as Grant reached for the handle, Catherine reached out and grabbed his wrist. "Wait." She turned slowly to face me. She looked me up and down with cold, critical eyes. She reached out and straightened the collar of my black dress, but it wasn't a gesture of affection. It was the way a manager fixes a crooked display. "Blair, I want to make something very clear before we walk in there," Catherine said, her voice low and even. "We are about to close a deal that will elevate this family to a new level of global influence. And frankly, you do not fit into that future. A 33-year-old dropout with no ambition and no assets is not the image we want to project." She took a step closer, invading my personal space. "So, after this meeting concludes, after you have served your purpose today, I want you to leave. I want you to cut ties with us completely. Do not come to Christmas next year. Do not call us for money. You are a liability, Blair, and successful businesses do not keep liabilities on the books." I looked at my mother. She was evicting her own daughter from the family to protect a reputation she had already lost. "Understood," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I will go. I will not be a burden to this family ever again." Catherine de Gat Dao Hai Long. Tot, it not ko kung beat 6 tri qua min. Grant hit mot hoi that sao, chin lai viao, vade kan qua doi nong ani mora chung tua byuk quan guang qua. Ho gi rang ho dang byuk veo mot kuok dam fan. Ho kong beat rang ho dang byuk veo mot fin toa, Va ban on de duok din dot. The conference room smelled of old money and ruthless efficiency. At the center of the room sat a massive glass table. Two men in charcoal gray suits sat on one side, their hands folded over pristine legal pads. They did not stand up when we entered. They did not smile. But it was the chair at the head of the table that drew every eye. It was a high-backed executive leather chair, and it was turned away from us, facing the panoramic window and the raging snowstorm outside. Grant cleared his throat, his professional lawyer voice cracking slightly. Good afternoon, gentlemen. I am Grant Wilson, CEO of Wilson Hospitality Group. This is our executive team, Catherine and Delaney Wilson. He gestured vaguely to me standing in the corner by the door. And this is our assistant. The lawyers nodded once, but remained silent. Grant opened his briefcase and pulled out the fraudulent spreadsheets I had been carrying. First of all, we would like to thank the chairman for seeing us, Grant began, projecting his voice toward the back of the turned chair. We understand Titanium Ventures has acquired our debt. We see this as a unique opportunity for synergy. The Wilson brand is a staple of Aspen luxury. Our occupancy rates are projected to hit record highs next quarter. He paused, waiting for a reaction. The chair did not move. Grant licked his lips, sweat forming on his lip again. I have prepared a comprehensive restructuring plan. We are willing to offer Titanium Ventures a minority equity stake in exchange for a refinancing of the principal. This partnership will be highly lucrative for everyone. Grant was rambling now, throwing out every buzzword he knew. He was trying to sell a sinking ship as a luxury yacht, and the person in the chair knew exactly where the holes were. The lawyer on the left simply raised a hand. It was a small gesture, but it had the stopping power of a freight train. Grant's mouth snapped shut. Mr. Wilson, the lawyer said, his voice dry as dust. Please stop. We are not here to listen to a sales pitch. We have already conducted our due diligence. He slid a thin black folder across the glass table. We have reviewed your operating costs and your debt-to-income ratio. The numbers you are presenting today are optimistic at best, fraudulent at worst. Grant's face turned a sickly shade of gray. But those are just projections. We just need time. We do not deal in projections, Mr. Wilson. We deal in liquidity. And the fact is, you have none. You are operating at a 40% deficit. You are not just distressed. You are insolvent. The word insolvent hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Catherine gasped, clutching her pearls. That is a lie. The Wilson name is worth millions. The second lawyer spoke up, his tone even colder. Brand equity does not pay the mortgage, Mrs. Wilson. We are moving forward with asset seizure. The hotel, the commercial properties, and this private residence. You have 45 minutes to vacate the premises. Grant stood up, his chair scraping loudly. You cannot do that. We have rights. Please, let me speak to the chairman. He gestured frantically at the turned chair. Surely he understands rough patches. I can explain the value. Grant's desperation turned into a final, pathetic act of betrayal. He scrambled to open the folder he had forced me to sign. Wait, Grant shouted. We have other assets. Collateral that wasn't in the disclosure. He pointed a trembling finger directly at me. Her. My sister-in-law Blair. She has a trust fund. Liquid cash and prime waterfront real estate. A timber cabin on the lake. Delaney gasped, but Catherine remained stone-faced. I have the power of attorney right here. Grant slammed the crumpled papers I had signed with a fake name onto the glass table. Take it all. Just give us an extension on the hotel. She is mentally unfit to manage her own finances anyway. She does whatever I tell her to do. Tell them, Blair. Tell them you want to help the family. I looked at Grant. He was willing to label me insane and leave me destitute just to keep his title for one more week. I tightened my grip on the water pitcher I was holding. Then, slowly, deliberately, I set it down on the side table. I straightened my spine and stepped out of the shadows. I walked toward the head of the table. Grant's eyes widened in confusion. What are you doing? Sit down. You are embarrassing us. I ignored him. I walked past the lawyers, who lowered their heads in respect as I passed. I walked straight to the high-backed leather chair. I stood behind it, my hand resting on the headrest. I think you are mistaken, Grant, I said, my voice calm and ice cold. I pulled the chair out. The wheels glided silently over the carpet. I sat down. I placed my elbows on the glass table and interlaced my fingers, staring directly into Grant's eyes. The room went deathly quiet. Grant's face went from red to white in a heartbeat. This seat is taken, I said. And your place, Grant, is on the other side of the table. Delaney let out a high-pitched, nervous hiccup. Blair, stop it. You are acting weird. Get up before you wrinkle the leather. Catherine stepped forward, her face tight with rage. Blair, get up this instant. Do you want to be arrested for trespassing? Get back to the corner and pour the water. I did not move. I turned my gaze to the lawyer on my right. Mr. Gregory, is the paperwork in order? Gregory straightened his tie and bowed his head. Yes, Madam Chairman. The asset liquidation files are ready for your signature. The security team is on standby to escort the previous owners off the premises. Madam Chairman. Grant took a staggering step back, bumping into the wall. Chairman? You? It is you? You are Titanium Ventures. You thought I dropped out of medical school because I could not handle the pressure, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. I dropped out because I was bored. I was trading distressed equities during anatomy lectures and making more in a week than a surgeon makes in a year. I realized that saving lives was noble, but saving companies was profitable. I picked up a silver remote and clicked it. The massive screen behind me roared to life. My name appeared in bold font, Blair Wilson, founder and CEO. I specialize in identifying incompetence, I continued. I find companies with good bones but bad leadership. I buy their debt, I strip their assets, and I rebuild them. I clicked the remote again. A new spreadsheet appeared. And while you were bragging about your connections, Grant, I was analyzing your bank transfers. Specifically, the transfers to a shell company called Sapphire Consulting. Delaney squinted at the screen. Sapphire Consulting? Who is that? Look at the lease agreement on the screen, Delaney, I said. It is for a luxury penthouse in downtown Denver. The tenant is a woman named Bianca. Grant has been funneling $400,000 of company money to his mistress while telling you the company couldn't afford your anniversary gift. The sound that came out of Delaney was a broken, jagged inhale. She looked at Grant, who was shaking his head frantically, sweat flying from his face. No, Delaney, listen. Grant pleaded. It is a business arrangement. It is complicated. Delaney stood up, her legs shaking. She picked up her glass of water and threw the contents directly into Grant's face. You stole my inheritance for a mistress? You monster. Grant let out a roar of primal rage, his face twisting into a mask of hatred. You, he screamed at me. You ruined everything. I will kill you. He launched himself across the table, his hands clawed and reaching for my throat. I did not move. Before his fingers could graze me, 2 large security guards detached themselves from the shadows by the door. They caught Grant midair, yanking him backward and slamming him face-first onto the carpet. Get him out of here, I said coldly. Hand him over to the police in the lobby for fraud and embezzlement. As they dragged a screaming, cursing Grant away, Catherine sank into a chair, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Blair, darling, you have to understand. I had no choice. Everything I did for the family. You cannot leave your own mother destitute. Stop, Catherine, I said. Do not insult my intelligence. You were the architect of this greed. But I am not a monster. I have made arrangements for you at Pineview Gardens. Catherine frowned. Is that near the St. Regis? No. It is a state-licensed elder care facility in the valley. You will have a roommate, and meals are served in a cafeteria. I have prepaid for 1 year. After that, you are on your own. Catherine's face went pale. A roommate? Blair, you cannot be serious. That is a prison. It is the life you can afford with a $400 monthly stipend, I said, dropping a copy of the check she once gave me on the table. Beggars cannot be choosers, mother. Those were your words, weren't they? I turned to Delaney. The keys, Delaney. To the Porsche. No. Delaney whimpered. Damon gave it to me. It is my car. Actually, Gregory interrupted, the car is registered to Sapphire Consulting. It belongs to Titanium Ventures. And since your credit cards are also corporate, they have been frozen. You have no money, Delaney. No car. No house. Delaney sank to her knees, finally understanding the magnitude of her ruin. I picked up Grant's gold Mont Blanc pen and signed the final foreclosure deeds. The transfer was complete. The hotel, the house, and the legacy were legally mine. I stood up and walked toward the door, leaving the remnants of my family weeping in the conference room. I did not say goodbye. You do not say goodbye to a tumor once it has been removed. The lobby of the Ritz-Carlton was bustling. As I stepped out of the elevator, the general manager hurried over, bowing slightly. Ms. Wilson, your car is waiting at the main entrance. I walked through the revolving doors and into the biting cold. Parked right in front, its engine idling with a powerful purr, was a jet-black Rolls-Royce Phantom. The valet opened the door, and I slid into the hand-stitched leather interior. The warmth enveloped me instantly. My driver, Derek, looked at me in the mirror. To the airport, Ms. Wilson? The private jet is fueled and ready. I looked out the window at the hotel rising above me. Somewhere up there, my mother and sister were packing their bags, preparing to enter a world of mediocrity they had always despised. They had spent their lives calling me the black sheep. They never realized that the black sheep is often just a wolf in waiting. To the airport, Derek, I said, settling back into the seat. We have a new acquisition in Tokyo to discuss. The car pulled away, moving silently through the snow, leaving the Wilson family in the rearview mirror until there was nothing left but the whiteout. They say blood is thicker than water, but when your own family hands you an invoice for your existence and tries to strip you of your only safety net to fund their toxic lifestyle, you have to protect yourself. My mother left me a tearful voicemail last week begging me to release just a fraction of the funds so she could move out of the shared room at the state facility. She says I've taken my revenge too far. So, I have to ask you, am I wrong? Should I have shown mercy to the people who are ready to throw me out into the blizzard? Thank you so much for watching and listening to my story. If you found this satisfying, please hit that like button, it really helps the channel out. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story of ultimate payback. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, I read every single one. See you in the next video.